everywhere around us. So that's one messed up arrangement. The second conflict built into capitalism is the one between the appropriators of the surplus, the capitalists, and those to whom the capitalist distributes pieces, portions of the surplus. With them too, there is ceaseless conflict. And here's why. The capitalist distributes surplus to secure himself as a capitalist, to reproduce the capitalist enterprise on the top of which he sits. Remember we went through last time. He gives a portion to lawyers to cover the legal problems. He gives a portion to managers to make sure those workers produce a lot of surplus. He gives a portion to the government so they have a police and so forth, an apparatus available to him. The poor capitalist is always troubled, upset, because he or she has to distribute the surplus to keep everything going. And so the capitalist is, here we go now, always in the position of trying to find a way to get his needs met with the least distribution of the surplus. He wants, for example, access to credit whenever he needs it for the least amount of interest he has to give to the damn bank from whom he gets credit. He wants his managers to manage, but he'd like to pay them the least amount so he can get the most management for the least amount of the surplus, so he has surplus left for all his other needs, etc., etc. So there are constant tensions between the capitalists who appropriate the surplus and all the people they distribute it to. Here in America, for example, for 30 years, we've had a wonderful display of one of these conflicts. The capitalist takes a portion of the surplus and gives it to the government, taxes. And he wants for that, our capitalist does, that there's a police force ready to help him in case there's any trouble, that there's an educational establishment that trains his workers so they're productive when they come to work, that there are roads kept properly so his workers can get to work without being late or having an accident, etc., etc. But starting in the 1970s, for reasons we're going to come to a little later, capitalists felt they didn't have enough surplus to take care of all their conditions. So they looked around and they said to themselves, to whom of the people, among those that we give cuts of the surplus to, which one of them can we squeeze so that we get what we need from them, but we don't have to give them as much surplus as we used to? And the decision, it's a complicated story, but the decision was reached, the one we're going to go after is the government. We're going to whack the government a good one. We're going to build a nationwide campaign, relentlessly, year after year, taught in the kindergarten, on the television, from the pulpit, wherever, that government is terrible. The government is full of incompetent people who never work, earn too much money, and fuck everything up. And we're better off if the government got off our backs. And we would save taxes in the bargain too. Hey, who wouldn't want to get rid of an unpleasant presence in your life while saving money? If it sounds too good to be true, it was. But it worked. It worked very powerfully. So the corporations who paid taxes out of their surplus succeeded. Simple statistic. Back in the 1970s, corporation taxes were about 20-25% of the total tax revenue the government raises in the federal government. Now it's in the neighborhood of 8%. Real simple. Don't need an advanced degree. Who makes up the rest of it? Well, of course, you do. Individuals. Two sources of tax revenue in the government. Business, individuals. If the business pays less, you figure it out. You pay more. And the corporations got what the government needed to do for them for less money. They saved them on taxes. That left it to the mass of people to fight out the remaining question while the corporations sat smiling. You have a choice, American people, now that we are not paying what we used to. Either you can keep the government doing all the things you like and make up by your taxes what we, the corporations, don't pay, or you can do without government services. Your choice, it's a democracy. You'll have the freedom. And that's what Americans do. Well-trained little doggies that we are. We struggle in each state and in each town. Should we have higher taxes and hold on to our government services, or should we save on taxes and forego our government? Wonderful. This is wonderful. The debate is how you accommodate the shift of tax burden from corporations to people. Not whether you do, just how you do. Either you pay more or you get less services. And an American people that accepts that is a people who have no idea about the production and distribution of this surplus. Because if they had that idea, then it would be clear to them what happened here. And that there is another choice. You could hold on to the services and not pay more taxes simply by having the corporations go back to paying the same rate of taxes they paid 30 years ago. Now there's an option. Fortunately, no political actor puts that forward. At this point, if I had a little music, the American anthem would be played. That's our country. But it's not just an American foible, it's a foible of a population for whom a theoretical analysis based on the surplus, which makes all this as simple as I just presented to you, is absent. Doesn't exist. Doesn't occur to a newspaper editor, a television commentator, a comedian, nobody. Letterman can't come up with this because it's not in the air. It's not that it's complicated. I've been able in a very few minutes to give you the basic outlines. It's not hard, but it is out of the consciousness. But if you had a surplus analysis, I think you'd see it. Now let's play it. If you understand that capitalism is a particular way of producing, appropriating, and distributing surplus, the way we've done, then you are able to reach the following insight. And rather than take you through all the steps that enabled us to get there, I'm just going to tell you this insight and hope that you can go back and see how it was produced. Capitalism is full of conflict. It always is. You see it all the time. You just have to put it together. For example, there are conflicts like the one I mentioned between the corporations, the capitalists, and the government. And so the corporations kind of bankrupt the government and then use that to basically get the people to struggle amongst each other over taxes or services. That's a conflict. It produces all kinds of difficulty, personal difficulty for all of us. Universities, for example, in the United States are now in terrible shape, in part because the government, which trains 3/4, 4/5 of the university students, hasn't got the money because it's not coming from the corporations, and the mass of people are freaked out by the level of taxes they have to pay and don't want to pay anymore, and so there's nothing for the universities left, and they're in terrible trouble. So the consequences of this are everywhere. There's trouble all the time. You all know the trouble between the producer and the appropriator of the surplus. That's what you experience on the job. Either a strike, that's one very obvious, when the workers have had it and refuse to work, or a lockout, that's when the employer says, I'm not going to let you in because you're not producing enough surplus to make this worth my while, and either you come down in your demands, or else I'm out of here and I'm moving to Paraguay, where they don't eat, so it's cheaper to hire people, and so forth. You're aware of all of it. The conflicts are always there. Every union can tell you about the 800 ways, from a grievance that they have to file in a particular situation, to a job action, to a strike, and everything in between that never stops. Never, ever stops. Those are conflicts. Now, periodically, these conflicts, in ways I'm going to go over with you later about the United States, but periodically, wherever capitalism has existed, these conflicts have exploded. That is, they haven't been small, local, general conflicts that could be resolved by the police or by a capitalist giving higher wages or by workers accepting quietly that they're not going to get what they need. No, sometimes the conflicts become big and you have a major crash of the system. At that point, people get very upset. Large numbers of people are laid off, large numbers of companies go bankrupt, prices may collapse. You really have a kind of bad situation, sort of like now, for the last 18 months. At that point, whenever you have a broad general crisis, and by the way, a broad general crisis, large or small, is an event which capitalist economists will say to you happen every 3 to 7 years in the history of every capitalism anywhere on the planet ever. So this is not a Marxist perception that this constantly happens. This is a generally accepted notion that built into capitalism is what they prefer to call a business cycle. Sounds normal. But it's close to a bicycle, turns around like a wheel. But from a Marxist point of view, this is an interesting eruption. It's like for Freud, a slip of the tongue. It teaches you a lot if you know how to pay attention to it. So these crises occur, and then capitalism has done something remarkable throughout its history. When the cries go up, hey, this system is unbearable. There's millions of us, not the United States today, millions of people unemployed. Roughly the number now is about 15 million. That's a lot of people. That's an awful lot of people. Millions are losing their homes, foreclosures. Businesses are going out, bankrupt. Resources are being wasted. It's really bad. When that happens, a cry goes up, hey, this economic system isn't working. It's not a deep thought. I walk down the street. I live on 6th Avenue. If you walk down 6th Avenue, about a third of the stores have a for rent sign in them. 2 years ago, no store had a for rent sign. Something's not working. And everybody understands, even if we're not allowed to say it publicly, that our system now has 15 million, that's the official number, the unofficial number is much higher, 15 million officially listed as unemployed. People who want to work, because that's how the number is put together, but can't find work. About a quarter of the capacity to produce in this country, land, factories, machines, store space, office space, about a quarter of our total capacity to produce is sitting idle. We have 15 million people who want to work. We have all the machines, equipment, and raw materials they could possibly need to work with. And we have vast unmet social needs. But we live in a system which can't put together the people who want to work with the stuff that's rotting to produce what we all know we need. Again, at this moment, I would play the national anthem, but I don't have a record player. That's a system that isn't working, and a lot of people can figure that part out. So the cry goes up, hey, this system isn't working. This puts the fear of whoever they believe in the capitalists as a group. They've been this place before, and if they haven't, their parents told them about it. Time to make a switch. Time to recognize things are not so good, and to come up with a story, an analysis, and a plan that will deal, or at least appear to deal with the problem without threatening the basic capitalist system. It's a logical thing anybody would do in a comparable situation. And here's what capitalism has worked out. When the system hits one of these bad crises, where there is lots of disaffection and dissenting views that are hostile to the system, we have to make a change. And the one that I'm going to talk about first, in one direction, and I'll show you how it goes in the other direction just as much, but the one I'm going to talk about is the one I want you to be upset about, because some of you think what I'm about to describe has to do with socialism. And here's the change. The private companies screwed up. It's the fault of Goldman Sachs or